Welcome to Schupak Sports. I'm Marty Schupak, and today we have a special guest, Walter Beede, who wrote a tremendous book. It's called The Process, and we're going to get into that right now. If you have a son or a daughter that has really dreams of playing beyond high school, and not just in baseball or softball, any sport, this book is a must. Walter, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Marty, thank you for having me, and good morning to you.
It's a pleasure. I enjoyed your book. I squeezed it in. It's a good read. It's an easy read. It's great. Quickly, let's get right into this. A lot of things stood out to me. You had mentioned, you said travel ball programs are often billed as the only path to success. And you really, sounds like you don't agree with that, which I want you to expand on that a little bit.
Sure. I think, in today's world, we see travel ball programs or the organization of travel ball as having a blueprint for younger student athletes to have some measure of success, both at the high school level and the college level. When I grew up, of course, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, it was a lot more organic than it was organized. And, whether it was Sandlot or Little League or Junior League, Babe Ruth, American Legion, etc., the single common thread here is simply playing baseball. And so in today's world of lessons and showcases and camps, etc., parents are led to believe that that's the holy grail of the college scholarship. At its essence, I believe that children are taught and they hear that the singular goal, if you're a baseball player at younger ages, is to play college baseball. In fact, it's not for everyone, meaning there are students that will get to a certain age and have other areas of interest, whether it be academics, whether it be theater or music, etc. And so the hamster wheel, as I often refer to it, is something that parents are drawn to at very younger ages because in most cases, parents don't have a baseball background. So if we kind of allow parents and students to see that there are other alternatives that are local in nature, what I call less stressed, less organized, and not as homogenized, then it will kind of allow them to get creative and kind of be able to navigate their own path.
Do you feel a lot of this travel ball, and I'm a little older than you, and my kids missed the whole travel ball growth, and I was asked to coach travel ball, but do you feel that in travel ball, there's too many games and not enough practices?
That's, Marty, you nailed it. That's exactly the issue. And so if we were to take baseball as a sport, from its infancy, and really it goes back to the late 1800s all the way through the 1900s, there was more of an emphasis on the practice model, meaning for every one game, you may practice 2 or 3 times. And that really allowed for a learning, for a maturation within the instinctual development of baseball players. And I think in today's world, and I see it all the time, I'm sure you do as well, we see all of these advertisements for 8U advanced players, come try out for this team, 6U. That to me just sounds silly, even coming out of my mouth. But there's too much emphasis on tournaments. So I give parents a case in point. A typical weekend of youth travel baseball between the ages of, say, 6 and 14 could include as many as 5 to 7 games in a 3-day time period. So one, how many repetitions can you guarantee that your son who's a outfielder or an infielder may ever get during those 7 games? That's one. Two, my goodness, if you're a pitcher, a parent of a pitcher, and your son pitches on a Friday and then has to come back on Sunday to get a ring or a trophy, we're stressing student athletes out as opposed to spacing the learning out over practice time. So practice allows one definitive difference over games, and that is consistent repetition. If your son is an infielder, he may get 1, possibly 5 in an entire weekend. Whereas if I'm practicing, I know that infielder is going to get 100, 200 repetitions. And through repetitions comes retention, which allows student athletes to feel more confident. And when you're confident, you're going to be more aggressive and make more plays. So practice has become almost ancient. It's become antiquated. We do that in the winter. We do that in the indoor environment. We don't do enough of it outdoors.
You also mentioned in your book, The Process, I thought it was very, very interesting. It made me feel good about myself. You said there are plenty of regular dads who are better teachers than even former big league players. Could you expand upon that?
Absolutely. I always go back to Ted Williams. And in my opinion, for me being from Boston, and I didn't get to see him play. So obviously I read books and listen to people, but Ted Williams was never as great of a manager as he was a hitter. And that's because in his mind, everybody should be able to hit like me because it's this simple. And so you lack the understanding of what I call the common man. So when I'm an elite player or an elite former player, I see the game in some instances as being not easy, but you should be able to do these things in order to become a better baseball player. Whereas a dad, and I go way back, and again, we're never going back to these days, and I completely understand that. But when I'm a dad, I understand the basics of throwing a ball, catching a ball, hitting a ball. And at its very core, at say 6 through 14, we're bypassing all that. So if I have a dad and I say, okay, all we need to do is make sure when we're playing catch, we want the boys to understand to try and center the ball in their body as it's coming towards them. Don't reach across your body. Don't reach up. Try to move your feet because catch play is a good indicator of a good baseball player. So in other words, it's simple, it's organic, it's something that can be done. And most dads, they want what's best for their children, but at the end of the day, they're donating their time. They're giving their time back. And I think it was an easy kind of nail for travel ball to kind of hammer, meaning, you don't want to go daddy ball. And got this whole vernacular and this term. And I'm trying to tell parents, spend time with your children. Spend time in your backyard. Play catch. Put a wiffle ball bat in their hands when they're very, very young, a big red barrel wiffle ball bat. As they get older and they have a deeper appreciation. So when a young boy begins to get into that, what I call 11 to 12-year-old, oh boy, I really like this game. And I go to a high school varsity game and I see what it is I want to become. Then we can begin to chart that course with maybe a little bit more experienced coaches if we can find them. And a lot of times it's as simple as going to your local high school and asking a few current players or maybe a member of the coaching staff, hey, is there any way you could give me some tips with regard to my son? And it can be as simple as that at the younger ages. I absolutely think that travel baseball has a place at the older ages, beginning above 14. But before that, I think dads really can do a lot of this stuff with their children.
I think it's a great point. And a little bit related, Walter, is you had a wonderful section in the book, and I wish you went into more and more detail. I would have loved reading it about how the youth in the Dominican Republic, what they have to deal with and how they really go back to basics. And could you expound on that also, the difference there and the difference here, where these families are willing to spend $10,000, $20,000?
Absolutely. And actually, Marty, I am going into greater detail on that. It's a baseball basics. It's a book I'm working on now. And I didn't want it to get lost in the process. I wanted to kind of touch upon it. And one of the things that I think parents have this big misunderstanding about is, we get lost in a sea of equipment and technology and gadgets and gadgets. And I often step back and say to parents, oh, you just bought these great set of weighted baseballs. I say in the Dominican, what they do is they basically take baseballs and softballs and they pound nails in them and they play catch with that. And in all intents and purposes, that's their weighted balls. But let's take it really at the roots. And it's a matter of developing a passion first by following their older siblings, by following their parents, uncles, grandparents to the ball field, to the sandlots. And there's this great video of Mariano Rivera showing a gentleman on Major League Baseball Network how to make a cardboard glove. And when you think about that, just on that point alone, making a cardboard glove to be able to go out and field ground balls. I mean, to me, that just oozes, I love baseball and I'm going to learn how to do this. Their repetitions come off of a wall. It comes off of a building. It comes off of their friends rolling ground balls. They play pickup games in the street, just like you used to see with stickball way back in the day. They play with pinky balls, tennis balls, wiffle balls, taped up socks. They are playing the game daily. There's no instruction or / lessons. There's no travel balls and trophies and rings. They're playing to emulate. And see, this is the key point to this. It used to be we would watch a lot of baseball, whether it be professional, college, locally, high school, locally, and we strive to be what we were seeing. In the Dominican and Puerto Rico and Mexico, go to watch a game and see the passion in the stands, and the children look and say, I can see what I want to become. And they learn the game by watching. Here, it's the exact opposite. We want to begin to force feed pickoff moves and cutoffs at these young ages before the boys can understand how to catch and receive and transfer a baseball, how to move, how to swing a bat properly. I think in those Latin countries, the first thing they develop is a true love, a passion, a burning desire to play, to become a good player. And here it's the exact opposite. We start and we kind of get everybody to get on a treadmill before they're even crawling with regard to baseball knowledge. So if we look around and we see Asuna, Soto, look at all of today's great players. Look at how easy they smile. Look at how much fun they have. Whereas if you go and look at some of these young travel teams, especially at the younger ages, there's way too much negative energy from the stands. It's really, and that's one of the things that I wish parents had a better understanding. Dominican, Puerto Rico, Mexico, you don't see a lot of parents at the ball field during pickup games.
Right. That's right.
Whereas here, we see a lot of parents and a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming at umpires, et cetera. So I just think it's a really negative kind of energy that is on top of these children at a very young age that takes the love away.
Right. And Walter, as they say, no one ever walks off the island.
Right.
These guys swing the bat. But anyway, we're talking to Walter Beede, who wrote this great book, The Process. And I just want to get into your background, which I thought was kind of fascinating. You're from Lynn, Massachusetts, right? Which is about 20 miles north of Boston.
Correct. Home of Tony C.
Right. Tony Canigliera. Okay. And give me your background when you started playing. And I also want you to touch upon, and maybe I heard it somewhere, or I don't know if I read it, whatever. I thought I heard that you lived out of your own car when you were in high school. Is that true? Touchy
point for me today, as my brother just recently passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So yes, indeed. So what happened is my mom, we lost our mother when I was 6. My brother was 1 at the time. And we lived with a single dad and my grandmother. My dad passed away when I was a junior in high school in 1979. And my brother was too young and he went to go live with my grandmother in Florida. I lived in my own apartment. Okay. I had my own apartment. My dad had a Social Security check that I received every month for $363.72. And I worked at the Moore's supermarket. But as long as I maintained my grades, I played multiple sports in high school. And I had to check in with the Department of Youth Services pretty much every week to make sure I was doing the right things and so forth. But for me, baseball, my parents were not athletic. There was not any what I would call visual for me to kind of chase. It all started based in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and it was an extremely athletic, energized neighborhood. Everybody was playing wiffle ball and basketball and street hockey, et cetera. But I developed a passion for baseball because just a chance meeting with Tony C. One day at a basketball game and noticed he was bouncing tennis balls against the wall repeatedly. And one day I had enough nerve to go up and ask him, and he said, listen, if you want to be a good baseball player, you have to develop strong forearms and wrists. And so squeezing tennis balls. Well, fast forward, I literally was the worst player, not an embellishment. I was cut probably 4 times. And when I say cut, didn't get selected for a little league team at 10 years old. I did make my junior high team, never made an all-star team until I was 15. But, you know, as I allude to in the book, I was raised, you know, you get 2 options. You either work harder or quit. You know, don't whine. I don't want to hear any whining. So literally, you know, I learned how to just hit acorns with a broomstick. I learned how to play catch off of a wall, a chimney in my neighborhood. And so it was just the little things for me. And finally, as I started to pick up steam and my physical maturation kind of began to sync up with, you know, my athleticism, you know, I found myself to be a very good hitter with a very strong arm. And I kind of took those things forward with me. And the lesson that I learned that I share in the book, I was drafted out of high school, a great scout named Lenny Murillo, locally. And he basically said to me, you know, hey, kid, you want to be a baseball player. You don't want to be an architect or a doctor. And then the same day that I chose between Arizona State and Coach Brock, and people forget that the Pac-12 back in the day was the equivalent of the SEC today. You know, basically, when you put $25,000 to $50,000 to a kid that's working at the Moolahs for, you know, $6.25. And the first round draft picks back then were only getting 200,000, 250,000. Joe Carter, Vance Lovelace. My issue was the day that I signed is the day that this Wrigley family sold the Cubs to the Tribune. And the Tribune, literally, everybody pre-draft or from that 81 draft was all released. And then Dallas Green and Lee Ilya, and they all came in and they just cleaned house. So I learned very quickly and very harshly that it was a business. So it served me well as a dad. 30 years later, almost to the day, you know, Tyler was drafted and opted to go to, you know, Vanderbilt University. And, you know, it worked out pretty well.
And I want to get right into that, your kids, because Tyler, from what I understand, he was a #1 draft pick twice. And the first time he turned down a tremendous amount of money to go to Vanderbilt. Was that a family type of decision? Did you have advisors? And could you give us sort of the timeline on that, how you decided that? And it worked out great.
Well, if we start at the back and go back and go towards the date of the draft, in the end, it worked out. Because at the end of the day, he was picked 21st overall in 2011 and 14th overall in 2014. He was a member of the first ever men's national championship of any kind at Vanderbilt University. And he met his now wife during that year as well in 2014. Going back to 2011, there's a lot of backstory. He was supposed to be selected by a certain team that was selecting after Toronto. Once Toronto made their selection, they had little to no communication with Tyler. Everybody else, and I mean that in a literal sense, every single person, his mom, his grandparents, his advisor at the time, anybody within his circle that didn't have the first name Walter, essentially said, you know, $2.7 million is life-altering money, and you know you can't walk away from this. He can get a college education at any time. My point was when I thought back and I watched all of my friends go through their college experience, looking at college in its entirety and not just from a baseball perspective. And I'm talking about the life lessons, the life lived as far as socially, with culturally. You only get that opportunity to experience college in that capacity once. When you're 30 years old trying to be a college student, you're not going to experience college in its full capacity as a 30-year-old as you would as an 18-year-old.
Exactly.
Case in point, #1 Kentucky basketball team loses to Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt. All the student body rushes onto the floor. You're not going to rush onto the floor as a 30-year-old, but as an 18-year-old, you remember doing that. So basically 15 minutes prior to signing, which was August 15th, 2011, Tyler had exhausted his all of his lists that he had created. And he said, "Dad, can we have a minute?" And, when you're a dad, you have to make decisions that you feel are in the best interest of your children. And we're not supposed to be friends. We're supposed to be parents. And so at that moment, I felt it was incumbent upon me to really share with Tyler my thoughts, non-baseball related. And trust me, it was 3, and he chose to go to Vanderbilt.
Right.
But those 3 years, and when I often tell people this, they see in my eyes, they think there's some sort of not a exaggeration or embellishment, just they can't get an understanding. Those 3 years were hell for a parent, because the risk of not fulfilling that moment again were just tremendous. And so to be able to have the weight lifted both off of his shoulders and my own. And the other thing is we don't understand as parents of student athletes, because of social media, the weight of expectation and what that burden truly carries to those student athletes that, kind of excel at the high school and college level.
So, okay. And he ended up going to Vanderbilt. They went to Vanderbilt championship. Is that right?
Right. He was a weekend starter from his freshman year through his junior year, and they won a national championship in 2014 over Virginia.
Okay, and then he was a #1 draft pick again, and I understand he went through Tommy John surgery, whatever, but I think he kind of, for up to this point in his life, he's lived the best of a lot of different worlds, as I'm looking at it as a parent. I think it was a good choice. I understand what you're saying about those 3 years. The major concern you probably had, every time like he stubbed his toe, you probably said, "Oh my God, is he okay?" You know what I mean? But Walter, let's just get back to the book, because we're going to close this out very shortly. That's fascinating. And by the way, your other son is a coach at LSU. Is that right?
He was coaching at LSU Eunice and LSU Alexandria. And now he's living in Houston, and he coaches at Pearland High School in Pearland, Texas.
Good for him. Good for him. I love it. All right, let's get right back to the book. We're talking to Walter Beede, who wrote this wonderful book, The Process. I urge anyone that's involved in sports really to get it. It's great. Walter, you have a good section, pitching versus throwing. Tell the audience what you mean by that, the difference.
Sure. When I'm working with younger families of younger student athletes, I'll always ask them, do you walk? Do you take walks often as a family? And they'll always say, yeah. I said, well, we take walks because we want to maintain overall health, heart health, leg health, just strength in our lower half, et cetera. I equate walking with throwing. But when I say to someone, do you run? Are you a runner? And then you start to hear, oh, I run, but I have sore ankles, I have sore knees, et cetera. Well, running is equivalent to pitching. Now, we don't count the number of steps that we take when we just go for a walk, nor should we count the number of throws when we're just throwing. Running is equivalent to pitching. So pitching causes stress. And so when we're doing something that's going to cause stress to the body, we're going to start to get sore or fatigued after a certain period of time. And I'll say to parents, if you're running, how active can you run? How can you run a mile? Can you run 2 miles? Well, some pitchers can throw 3 innings. Some can throw 5 innings. But there's going to come a point where fatigue begins to enter into the equation. And similar to slowing down with running, the body's going to slow down when it comes to pitching. And so there's this misunderstanding of when do I need pitching lessons and why. First, you need throwing lessons. You need to understand what a throwing athlete, regardless of what position you're going to play within baseball, obviously with the exception of DH, you're going to have to do some throwing. Catchers are going to throw the same number of pitches as the pitchers are throwing. And in fact, they throw more. And so I always encourage parents, the more catch you can play with all objects, footballs, softballs, baseballs, wiffle balls, tennis balls, play catch, because essentially what your body is learning through repetition is proper sequencing. So I'll share this with you real quick. Tommy John surgery is typically a surgery that happens due to the fact that your wrist casts away from your elbow. Meaning, if I watch a quarterback throw, the quarterback's wrist is typically going to stay over the thrower's elbow. Whereas pitchers, when they're very young, to create distance, they try to cast or throw sidearm or 3/4. And the further that wrist is away from your elbow, you're stressing your elbow. So by playing catch, your body's going to naturally sequence the elbow to the wrist to the fingers. And the more catch you play, the stronger your arm and your throwing muscles will become. So as you get older, physical maturation allows you to throw harder or further. You won't have as much injury potential as you might when you're just taking a pitching lesson.
Okay, Walter, we're going to close this out. I have a ton of questions, but I'll have to have you back on. But try to give me a couple of short answers to these, and then we'll close it out. What age should a pitcher start throwing a curveball? Your opinion?
My belief is 14 to 15. Learn a fastball and a changeup, control both, and then move to the breaking ball.
Okay, and Dr. Andrews always had the idea that you shouldn't teach the curveball till they go through puberty till they start shaving. Do you agree with that? I mean,
yes.
Okay,
yes.
I do too. I think it's great. Quickly, how important is it for an athlete to play multiple sports?
I feel it's extremely beneficial only because you learn athleticism from the feet up. You're not doing it from the head down.
Okay, great. And you have a great section, and I know you can't answer quickly, but the section is that baseball is not just the box score. You observe players if they're at the top step of the dugout. Some players will get a scorebook and they'll start keeping score themselves. Some players will just watch their position and try to pick up things like that. How important is it, besides the box score, as far as go ahead?
I tell parents all the time, the more engaged your son is within the overall scope of the game as a teammate, as a student athlete, as a we guy versus a me guy, the more coaches are going to notice.
Terrific. Walter Beede is like the best guest I've had. He wrote this book, The Process. You have to get it if you're involved in youth sports, not just baseball, not just any sport. And if you have desires, if your kid is like a 9th or 10th grade and you think they have potential, this is definitely a must. Walter, thank you so much. One last question, we close it out. You're up there. Are you familiar with a football player named E.J. Brown? E.J. Perry.
E.J. Perry?
Yeah, he went to Brown University.
I know if it's the same E.J. Perry that I believe you're referring to, as I have a lot of people that are at Brown and know him. I know of him. How's that? I've never met him personally.
Okay, that's all right. The family is up there near Andover and Lawrence.
Yes,
they'd be going
right next door. Yeah, they're right next door to where I live.
I'll talk to you about them off the air. What can I say, Walter? You're a great guest. I will have you on again. Good luck with both your sons. And listen, I'd love for Tyler to end up on my Yankees, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Well, he happens to know the pitching coach and the director of performance and strength, so we may see that in the future.
I would love it. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty.
Okay, don't go anywhere.